The CZ-75 is one of those pistols that has just stood the test of time. Designed in 1975 in what's now the Czech Republic. It was under communist rule during the 1970s, and because of that, they had to have a secret patent. They were very careful getting this out to Western nations, and because of that, this has been one of the most copied pistol designs in history, right next to the 1911. And you'll see them all over. There's so many different models of the CZ-75 or this complete design, and it is a very proven design. The CZ-75 has served in more nations with military and police units than any other firearm in history. So it's really a battle-proven design. It's really ergonomic. It's just a wonderful pistol. And again, it's just as popular today. Because of that, a lot of times you don't see a lot of CZ-75s out on the market because whatever they produce is being sold really quickly. And I am a really big CZ fan, whether it's the CZ-75 or any of the CZ pistols or shotguns and rifles. They make a whole line of different products. Czech has always been a source and a mecca for quality firearm designs. And so what we're going to look at today, though, is the Omega trigger system with the CZ. And one of the things that you'll notice on the slide is this Omega on the slide. Now, if you see the Omega, you know that you have the Omega trigger system in here. And of course, CZ-75. Now, this was developed from their new polymer line, the P07 and the P09. And those are really simple, easy trigger systems. One of the great things about the Omega trigger system is that it's more robust, they're using better materials, and it's much simpler. But it is an all-steel pistol. It's fairly weighty and holds 16 rounds, and they are steel magazines. It's not one of the new polymer striker fire type pistols, but yet it still has a large following today. First thing we're going to do is double check to make sure the magazine is empty and the gun is unloaded, and it is. This is a double action, single action pistol, and that means that when the and I'm going to drop the hammer. When you take the trigger and you pull the trigger, it actuates the hammer, and you can see it coming back, and then it fires. It's a long, fairly heavy double action pull, and then your subsequent shots, once the slide has been racked, your hammer will be in the rear position. You can also bring that back with your thumb, and it is a very smooth single action pull. And that's really where most people, especially if you take this out to the range, most people are shooting this single action, because then every subsequent round will have the hammer in the rear position. But what this does, it allows you to either carry this cocked and locked. We have a frame safety right here, and so you can carry it in this manner just like you would your 1911, or which you'd have to actually drop the hammer, which can be a safety issue, and then bring it back a quarter notch. It's not a half cock, it's a quarter cock. And there is a firing pin block in here. In fact, the CZ-75 originally didn't have a firing pin block. But if you see B on the slide, that means that this has the firing pin block. So if this gun's dropped, especially on the hammer, there's no danger of it going off. In fact, I have an SP01 right here with the decocker on it. And of course, we're going to double check, make sure the gun is unloaded. And it is. Drop the magazine. Here, when we have the hammer back, bring the decocker, and it drops the hammer into this half cock notch. Again, it is double single action. Now, one of the big considerations with an all-steel frame pistol, especially a full-size service pistol, is the weight, and we're talking about 31.4 ounces. Now compare that to the Glock 17, which is the full-size Glock 9mm. It comes in at about 25 ounces. So you have about a 6-ounce difference in the two pistols, which if you're carrying this, especially over the long haul, this is going to be much heavier, and it's a lot weightier. Of course, that translates, though, into recoil. Because of the weight of the pistol, it's going to hold the muzzle down. It's going to be more substantial in your hand. But there's another thing that's really important about the CZ-75 that's very different. The frame itself rides over the slide rails. And I'm going to show you. We'll look at it a little bit more when we break the pistol down. But here you can see the slide rails actually ride inside the frame. Now, that does a couple of things. First off, it has a really low bore axis, and that means that when you bring your hand up, you can bring your hand really high up right next to the slide, and the slide's fairly shallow. So you're going to have a really low recoil of the slide coming back. And what that's going to do, the higher up the slide is, the more it tends to lift up. It has to do with leverage. So with that being low in the hand, it's going to help with recoil. But it's also going to help with accuracy, because this is a tight fit right here in this slide, and it just makes these guns very accurate. And that's one of the things, even new shooters will find that the CZ-75 is very accurate out on the range. Now, the big thing is about the Omega trigger system is the trigger, and so we're going to compare it to one of the standard trigger systems in this compact version, the PCR. And this is a CZ-75 PCR. It's a little bit shorter in the barrel, it's shorter slide length, it's a little bit shorter in the grip, but all the internals are CZ-75. So what we have here, and what we're going to do is make sure the gun is loaded, obviously, and there's no magazine. And I want to do it with single action, because double action is typically not what you're going to be shooting except for maybe your first shot. So what we have here is we have some free play right here, and then it comes up on a wall. Once we hit the wall, there is some play right there, and you can feel a little bit of the grit, or just a little bit resistance, and then a nice crisp break once you hit that. It's almost like a two-stage trigger. Now, to keep things fair, we have it in double action here. We're going to pull the hammer back. It's very smooth, actually, but it is fairly heavy. With the Omega trigger system, and of course the gun isn't loaded, we have some play, same. A little bit of resistance, and then a snap. There is a lot less creep in the Omega trigger system. And then, of course, double action, about the same. It's a long, heavy, smooth trigger pull. One thing, too, is the hammer travel. If you'll watch how far back the Omega trigger goes compared to the way back of the standard trigger. And we're going to try to do it together. See how it's even going back farther. Definitely a difference in the travel of the hammer. So I think really, as far as the Omega trigger system, is only just an improvement in materials, again, and simplicity. Less to fail. So the improvement is not over how the trigger feels as much as it is just the quality of the trigger. And what's really great is the price is less for the Omega system, because again, it's more simple. Now we're going to break the pistol down, and of course the mag is out. We're going to double check to make sure the gun is unloaded, and it is. Okay, if you'll notice right here toward the back of the frame in the slide, there are two hash marks. And to break the pistol down, you line up those hash marks, and then you take your slide stop on this side and you push it through. Now typically, especially with a new pistol, and this one's a fairly new one, we're going to take the magazine and we're just going to push the slide stop out. That tends to be one of the best ways to do it. And then you just pull it directly out of the frame. Then we just let the slide go forward. This gives you a little bit better look at the internal slide rails. They run all along the entire length of the frame. And here we can see also the slide rails on the slide itself. It does make it really small and narrow, while it's working through the slide, which makes it really nice, keeps the mass down from the slide. Go ahead and remove your recoil spring and guide rod. Here's the barrel, and of course, again, it is the linkless design, the John Browning linkless design. Has a really nice high polished feed ramp, which helps with reliability. Now, one of the great things about this pistol, and most of your CZs, I've heard very, very few problems with the CZ as far as reliability. These guns are just super reliable. The Omega trigger system's right here on the right, and then we have your standard CZ-75 trigger system here. Now this is the decocker, so there's going to be a little bit of issue with some differences with the decocker. but you can see how much more complicated your original CZ-75 trigger is. And again, this is much easier to pull out. I'm not going to pull it out right now just because I'm not going to pull out the standard CZ-75 trigger system. If you want to see the Omega trigger system a little closer, I do have a P07 video where I did remove the decocker and added a standard frame safety, which made it really easy to do. But then you can see some close-ups of the Omega trigger system. But here you can see just immediately from the top that there's some definite differences between the two. This is much simpler, it's more robust, the materials are better, and it's easier to disassemble and to assemble. One thing I noticed right away though is the CZ-75 Omega has a wider, thicker hammer than your standard SP01, and this would be the same system that would be in your standard CZ-75 without the Omega trigger system. Here you can see that you have a double horn here with just one horn here with the Omega. It's a little more complicated down in this area as well. Here you can get a better look at it. And just like the Glock, they keep it really simple, and because of that, there's less to fail. And I think that's one of the reasons why that the CZ-75 went with the Omega trigger system, and then again with their polymer frame pistols. Now me personally, I don't necessarily break down my trigger system, but if I do and I want to, I can. It's not a big deal, which makes it kind of nice. But this is pretty much field strip. So we're just going to return the barrel. We're going to put the recoil spring and guide rod back into place. Slide your slide back over your frame. Line up your two notches here. And then just pop it into place. Check for function, and we're good to go. Now one thing you'll notice is because the slide fits down into the frame, the serrations are very narrow, and that can be a little bit of an issue grabbing a hold and pulling that back. But they're aggressive enough to where you can get them. But it is something to consider that it is a little more difficult to pull those back. We have a squared trigger guard with serrations here. It is a nice metal magazine release. It's very positive. It comes right out. Of course, the steel magazines are nicely blued. Very attractive magazines. Now we have our slide stop right here, and it just engages like this. The barrel is cold hammer forged. It's 4.6 inches. The cold hammer forged barrel is going to give you extended life. The sights on the pistol are 3-dot. They are illuminated. They're not really night sights. You just light them up and they stay lit for a period of time. It's not really a long time, and they really have to be charged. In fact, I'm going to charge these up just a quick second. And here you can see the glow. But they're not all that effective, honestly. I think if I was really wanting to, I would probably add some night sights or different sights to these pistols. That's one of the things, though, that's really great about the CZ line is that it is very popular, and there are a lot of aftermarket parts and accessories that can go on these pistols. And also, the top of the slide is serrated, so when you're not going to get glare from the sun shining here on the top of your slide, and that really makes it nice. But the sights do show up very well in bright sunlight, and they're very easy to acquire. The grips are checkered plastic grips. Some of the new CZ models, not necessarily the CZ-75, but a lot of other ones have just rubberized grips here. Very plain. It does have the CZ logo right here. This is, again, it's a really ergonomic pistol. The Commander hammer, of course, it's going to fit down here. It's going to be less chance of slide bite because of the beaver tail, and it makes it look really nice. Of course, one of the big influences of the CZ-75 is the Browning high power, and here we have a high power. Of course, this is a single action pistol. There is no, the hammer doesn't actuate when pulling the trigger. But a lot of the design that went into the Browning high power was adopted with the CZ-75. Now, one of the things about the CZ-75 is there's a high demand for these pistols compared to the production of these pistols. I have a good friend of mine that works at CZ, and I talk to him quite often, and one of the things that's a big deal is when these guns come in, they're usually already sold. They don't stay around long. And so it's one of the reasons why you don't see a lot. It's because they're bought up very quickly. They're very high quality, and in much demand. The standard CZ-75, the manufacturer suggested retail is $612, where with the Omega trigger system, it runs $544. Now that's manufacturer suggested retail. Typically you can find a lot of these guns cheaper from gun shops and places like that. One of the other things, the magazines themselves, they run about 40 bucks. But Metgar, which probably makes these mags anyway, but they run about 30 bucks. So that's probably a little bit better option. And the $40 price was from CZ, their custom shop. So you might be able to find the CZ factory mags for less as well. Because they are very popular, there are going to be a lot of accessories and things that you're going to be able to find. Here it's just black on black. It looks kind of plain. It still functions. I really like the way this feels, but I really like really good grips on my pistol. So I like to go from something like this to something like this, and this to me makes it a lot nicer, a lot more quality because of the grips. It makes it more individual, and that's one of the things about a lot of the polymer frame pistols nowadays, is that you get what you get. You can get the FD frame or you can get it Cerakoted, but really the grips are what they are. So any grips that I can replace, whether it's the 1911s or something like this CZ-75, I like to put on some nice quality grips. These are VZ G10 grips. I like those on some pistols. I do like the Hogue grips as well, the wood grips, and they do make G10 grips also. This really helps to personalize your pistol, just like the original SP01 that I had here. And these are VZ grips as well. They're pretty aggressive. You can get different styles. These are aggressive. These are not so aggressive. It does come with two 16-round steel magazines. One thing that's really cool too is not only will your standard 16-round magazines fit, but if you have some of the SP01 18-round magazines, they'll fit in there as well, of course with a large base pad. So one of the things about the CZ-75 magazine is that it just has the metal base pad, and I'd like to probably put a nice little polymer or rubber butt pad on these just to give it a little more comfort, but it does allow it to ride really close into the frame. One of the things I will say though about this pistol, rather than a lot of other double stack 16 plus round magazine capacity pistols, is that because it's so thin, it's going to be a little easier to carry something like this if you like to carry large frame pistols, just because of the thinness of this pistol, and there's not a lot going on here. Now the overall length of the pistol is 8.1 inches, the height is 5.4 inches. Biggest difference in the slide is 1.4 inches, and that has to do with the levers right here on the side. Now we're going to check the trigger pull on this pistol, and we're going to go ahead and make sure again that the gun is unloaded. 4.87, so just a little over 4.5 pounds. £4 pounds 10 ounces, almost 11 ounces. £4 pounds 9.5 ounces. So we're getting pretty consistent reading with 4.5 or just a touch over 4.5 pounds. Now the double action trigger pull is going to be a different story, and that has a lot to do with really it's being safe. I mean, you can carry this like a double action revolver with the safety off. So your first shot will just be boom like this. Again, it is a pretty stout trigger pull. Yeah, that's 11 pounds and 1 ounce. £11 7 ounces. Now you can have trigger work done and improve the trigger on these pistols, especially the standard frame safety. With the decocker, it's more difficult to improve your trigger pull. With the standard cocked and locked or the frame safety, it's going to make it easier. Now I'm going to talk about two of my most favorite things about the CZ-75, and the first is the ergonomics. I mean, the sheer natural grip that this thing has. I mean, it just points, it feels good in the hand, just the way it moves. It's not too thick like a lot of double stack magazines make a lot of the pistols. They just make it really thin, even though this is a double stacked magazine. With the beaver tail, it helps with the way this hump works. I mean, it's just designed to fit the human hand. Because of that, it makes it really easy and pointable to shoot. The second thing that I really like, which really falls in line with this, is the internal slide rails. Because of the support of the frame on that slide, it's going to be inherently more accurate. And it's going to help with the recoil mitigation. It's going to get that recoil, and it's going to help it slide better. It's with the axis and the bore axis, it's going to be going straight back on the hand like this, and it just really makes it nice and a pleasure to shoot. So those are two things that to me are just outstanding about the pistol design. I'm going to give you a third because I just want to. The CZ-75-2 right here, the natural, or the CZ-75B, how it comes together and it just scallops down. I love that. It just makes it slick, trim, and smooth. Very similar to the Browning High Power. In fact, a lot of the lines are similar to the Browning. Now, a couple of things that I'm not really all that keen about is the weight. And obviously, it's a full service pistol, it's a full size pistol. So, you know, weight is what it is. It doesn't stop me from loving this pistol. But it is one of the things as far as making it very versatile in a lot of roles. But for a combat pistol, if you're going to take this out, I think that makes it excellent. It helps with recoil, it keeps it really steady at the range, and you do have a full pistol in your hand. I mean, it balances really well. But the weight is one of the things. I guess the other thing would be the heavy trigger pull on double action. It is heavy. Now it's smooth, but it is heavy. So, you know, that is one thing. Now, there are trigger jobs that can be done. There's a lot of spring kits and everything else that can be put to this pistol to really make it top notch. In fact, a lot of competitive shooters use the CZ-75 as their base for their competitive pistols. So that makes it really nice and shows you that the quality and what this gun, the potential of this gun is. Now, if you're looking for the Omega trigger system to be much better than the original, as far as in trigger pull, trigger weight, where it breaks, how crisp it is, you're not really going to find a lot of difference. The big thing is it's much more simple, it's more robust, and it's just made of better materials. So, and then of course it brings the price way down, which I think it's worth it. And I highly recommend the Omega trigger system in your CZ pistol. Now, if you have one of the standard trigger systems and it's working for you, which they do, and I have a number of them and I'm not even about to change them out, I think though that that's an excellent choice as well. The CZ-75 with the Omega trigger system, thumbs way up. Be strong, be of good courage. God bless America, long live the Republic. Especially considering you have a Glock coming in at about 26 ounces. Is that right? 26 ounces. The barrel is cold hammer forged. It's 4.6 ounces, so it's just under 4.5. Okay. They have a nice check. Okay. The standard CZ-75 magazines just has a metal bape. Okay. And I'm going to have to give it a big thumbs way up. You know, the CZ-75, it's a man's pistol.